mistook a stranger for my Uber, not knowing he was a millionaire CEO. I never imagined he'd fall in love with me. And what happened next changed everything. My name is Rebecca, and I never imagined that one simple mistake would change my life forever. You know those moments when you're so exhausted, so emotionally drained, that you're basically running on autopilot. That was me on that rainy Thursday night in Chicago. I'd just finished my third job of the day, cleaning office buildings until God knows what hour, and my body was screaming for rest. But rest was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not when my dad Benjamin was fighting cancer, and every dollar counted toward his surgery. I remember standing on that corner, rain soaking through my cheap jacket, watching the water run down the gutters like tears. My phone was dying, showing that familiar red battery warning, and I was desperately trying to call an Uber. The argument I'd had with my sister Ashley earlier that evening was still echoing in my head. Her words cut deep. "Rebecca, you can't save everyone. Maybe it's time to accept that we don't have money for miracles." God, how I hated her for saying that. How I hated that she might be right. When I saw the black sedan pull up to the curb, I didn't even look twice. I was so tired, so defeated, that I just assumed it was my ride. The rain was coming down harder now, and I could barely see through the water streaming down my face, though I'm not sure if it was all rain, or if some of those drops were tears. I yanked open the door and collapsed into the leather seat, immediately noticing how warm and dry it was inside. "Sorry I'm late," I mumbled, wiping my face with the back of my hand. Traffic was crazy, and I couldn't find my phone charger, and honestly, this whole day has been a nightmare. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. That's when I looked up and saw him, Marcus Hamilton. I'd seen his face in every business magazine, every financial newspaper in the city. The CEO who'd built $1 billion empire before he turned 40. The man whose story was both legendary and tragic. Everyone knew about his wife's death 4 years ago. And there he was, sitting in the driver's seat of what I now realized was definitely not my Uber, staring at me with the most intense dark eyes I'd ever seen. My first instinct was to bolt, to mumble some embarrassed apology and scramble out of his car as fast as possible. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was something I saw in those eyes, a pain that looked eerily familiar. It was the same pain I saw in my own mirror every morning. "I'm so sorry," I started, but he held up a hand. "Where do you need to go?" His voice was softer than I expected, almost gentle. I should have said nowhere, and gotten out. I should have explained the mistake and called another Uber. Instead, I found myself saying, "Anywhere but here." He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. That's when everything changed. Instead of dropping me off at the nearest corner, Marcus started driving through the city. We didn't talk at first, just two strangers sharing the silence and the steady rhythm of rain against the windshield. Chicago looked different from inside his car, softer somehow, like the city lights were painting watercolors on the wet glass. "Rough day?" he finally asked. I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "Rough life," and that's when it all came pouring out. I don't know why. Maybe because he was a stranger. Maybe because I was so tired of keeping everything inside. But I told him everything. About Dad's cancer. About working 3 jobs. About feeling like I was drowning and no one cared enough to throw me a life preserver. About how Ashley thought I was naive for believing we could save Dad. And how guilty I felt for sometimes wondering if she was right. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When I finished, I felt empty, but somehow lighter, like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for months. "I lost my wife 4 years ago," he said quietly, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. "Victoria. She died in a car accident after we'd had this terrible fight. I said things I can never take back, and the last image I have of her is her walking out that door, crying because of something cruel I said." The pain in his voice was so raw, so real, that I felt my chest tighten. Here was this powerful man, someone who had everything money could buy, and he was just as broken as I was. "I'm sorry," I whispered, and I meant it. "The guilt eats at you," he continued. "Every day you wake up thinking maybe today you'll figure out how to make it right, but you can't bring back the dead, and you can't undo words once they're spoken." We drove in silence after that. both lost in our own thoughts. The rain had started to let up, and I could see glimpses of stars between the clouds when he finally pulled up in front of my apartment building. Though I couldn't remember giving him the address, I felt like I was waking up from a dream. "Thank you," I said, my hand on the door handle, "for listening, for not thinking I was crazy for crying to a complete stranger. We're not strangers anymore," he said, with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "And Rebecca, don't give up on your dad. Miracles happen when you least expect them." I stared at him. "I never told you my name. It was on your work badge," he said gently, pointing to the ID card clipped to my jacket. As I walked to my building, I turned back once to see his car still there. Marcus watching to make sure I got inside safely. I raised my hand in a small wave, and he nodded before driving away into the night. I climbed the 3 flights to our tiny apartment, expecting to find Ashley asleep, but she was sitting at our kitchen table with her laptop open, studying something on the screen with intense concentration. She quickly closed it when she saw me. "You're soaking wet," she said, but there was something different in her voice, something I couldn't quite identify. "It was raining," I replied, too tired to explain about the car, about Marcus, about how this random encounter had somehow made me feel less alone in the world. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the last drops of rain against my window, I kept thinking about those dark eyes and the pain they held. I had no idea that my life had just taken a turn towards something extraordinary. I had no idea that the man in that black sedan would become both my salvation and my greatest heartbreak. I just knew that for the first time in months, I fell asleep without crying. I didn't expect to see him again. Honestly, I thought that night in the rain was just one of those random moments that happen in a big city. You meet a stranger, share something real, and then you both go back to your separate worlds like it never happened. But life has a funny way of proving you wrong. 3 days later, I was leaving my evening shift at the diner, my second job of the day, when I saw the same black sedan parked across the street. My heart did this weird little skip, and I found myself walking slower, wondering if I was imagining things. When the window rolled down and I saw Marcus's face, I felt this mix of excitement and nervousness that I hadn't experienced since high school. "Rebecca," he called out, "can I give you a ride home?" I should have said no. I should have remembered that we lived in completely different worlds, and that whatever connection we'd shared that rainy night was probably just 2 broken people finding comfort in shared misery. But there was something in his voice, something almost vulnerable, that made me nod and cross the street. This time, I got in the car knowing exactly who he was. "How did you know where to find me?" I asked, buckling my seatbelt. "I may have done a little research," he admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. "I hope that's not too creepy." I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation the other night. The honest way he said it made my chest warm. I've been thinking about it too. As we drove through the city, I studied his profile in the dashboard light. There were lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, and his expensive suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. For someone who had everything, he looked like he was carrying the weight of the world. "Tell me about Victoria," I said quietly. I don't know what made me brave enough to ask, but something about the safety of the car, the cocoon of darkness around us, made it feel okay to probe deeper. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. She was God. She was everything I thought I wanted. Beautiful, smart, came from the right family. We met at a charity gala. Very traditional, very expected. Our families approved. The business world approved. It looked perfect from the outside, but it wasn't. He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. "I loved her," he finally said, "but I think I loved the idea of her more than I loved her." Does that make sense? I loved having the perfect wife, the perfect life, the perfect image. I was so focused on building my empire that I forgot to actually live in the life I was creating. I watched the city lights blur past us. What happened the night she died? She wanted to start a family. I kept saying, "Not yet, not now. The company needs me." She accused me of caring more about business than our marriage, I told her. He paused, his voice breaking slightly. I told her that maybe she should find someone who had time for her dreams, since I was busy building a future for both of us. My heart ached for him. "Marcus." She left crying, said she needed some air, needed to think. An hour later, the police were at my door telling me her car had skidded off the road in the rain. He pulled over and put the car in park, his hand shaking. If I hadn't been such an ass, if I had just listened to her, she'd still be alive. Without thinking, I reached over and covered his hand with mine. You can't blame yourself for an accident, can I? He looked at me with those dark eyes full of pain. I spent 4 years building walls around myself, telling myself I didn't deserve to be happy. I threw myself into work, into making money, because it was easier than dealing with the guilt. And now I met a woman who works 3 jobs to save her father's life, and it made me realize I've been wasting mine feeling sorry for myself. The way he said it, the raw honesty in his voice, made something flutter in my chest. I'm not some inspiration story, Marcus. I'm just trying to survive. That's what makes you extraordinary. We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, and I found myself telling him about Dad, about how he used to read me bedtime stories, even when he was exhausted from double shifts at the factory, about how he taught me to change a tire and balance a checkbook, because he said a woman should never depend on anyone else for the important stuff, about how watching cancer steal pieces of him every day was slowly killing me too. He sounds like an amazing father, Marcus said. He is. He's the only man who's never let me down. I realized how that sounded, and quickly added, not that you've let me down or anything. I barely know you. Marcus smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him. But you want to know me? It wasn't a question, and I felt my cheeks heat up. Maybe. I'd like that. To know you, I mean. Not the version of you that works 3 jobs and carries the world on her shoulders. The real you. This is the real me. I laughed, but it sounded hollow. I don't have time to be anyone else. When was the last time you did something just for yourself? Something that made you happy? I had to think about it, and that realization hit me hard. I honestly can't remember. That's going to change, he said with such certainty that I almost believed him. As he drove me home that night, I felt something shifting inside me. For years, I'd defined myself by my struggles, by what I was fighting against. But sitting next to Marcus, sharing our stories and our pain, I started to remember that there might be more to life than just surviving. When we pulled up to my building, I didn't get out right away. Will I see you again? I asked, hating how hopeful I sounded. If you want to, I do. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card. My personal number. Call me when you need a ride, or when you need someone to listen, or when you remember what makes you happy. I took the card, our fingers brushing for just a moment. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me that there are still good people in the world. As I walked to my building, I felt lighter somehow. Ashley was already asleep when I got home, and I was grateful not to have to explain the smile I couldn't seem to wipe off my face. I sat on my bed, turning Marcus's card over in my hands, and for the first time in forever, I let myself imagine what it might feel like to be happy. I had no idea that my sister had been watching from the window, or that she'd already started asking questions about the expensive car that kept dropping me off. I was too caught up in the possibility of something beautiful to notice the shadows gathering around us. Those next 2 months felt like living in a beautiful dream that I was terrified of waking up from. Marcus and I fell into this routine that felt both natural and surreal. He'd pick me up after my shifts. Never the same time, never planned. But somehow he always knew when I needed him most. We'd drive through Chicago, talking about everything and nothing, sharing pieces of ourselves that I'm pretty sure neither of us had ever shared with anyone else. I learned that he was afraid of thunderstorms because they reminded him of the night Victoria died. He learned that I sang off-key in the shower and that I'd never been on a real vacation in my entire life. He told me about growing up with parents who measured love and achievements and stock prices. I told him about Dad teaching me to fish at the community pond when we couldn't afford to go anywhere fancy. The thing that scared me most was how right it felt, how easy it was to talk to him, to laugh with him, to just be myself. I'd spent so long being strong for everyone else that I'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone take care of me. Even in small ways. You're different when you're not trying to save the world, Marcus told me one evening as we sat in his car outside Millennium Park, watching late-night joggers pass by. Different how? Younger, happier, like you remember that you're allowed to smile. He was right. With him, I felt like Rebecca the person, not Rebecca the caretaker or Rebecca the breadwinner. For the first time in years, I felt like a woman who deserved to be loved. But even in the middle of this happiness, reality kept creeping in. The difference between our worlds was impossible to ignore. When Marcus talked about his day, it involved board meetings and million-dollar deals. When I talked about mine, it was about which customer had left the biggest mess in the diner bathroom. I tried not to think about what we looked like together. Him in his $1,000 suits, and me in my thrift store clothes that I washed by hand because the laundromat was too expensive. I tried not to wonder what his friends would think if they knew he was spending his evenings with a girl who cleaned offices for a living. "You're thinking too loud," Marcus said one night, catching me staring out the window with that familiar worried expression I couldn't seem to shake. "Just wondering when you're going to come to your senses," I admitted. He pulled over and turned to face me. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Come on, Marcus. Look at us. Look at our lives. I gestured at the luxury interior of his car. "You're you, and I'm nobody. Don't say that." His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Don't you dare say that. It's true though, isn't it? This whole thing is crazy. You could have anyone you want, someone educated, someone who fits into your world, someone who doesn't come with a mountain of problems." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and I felt my heart sink. This was it. This was when he'd agree with me, and we'd both acknowledge that this beautiful dream had to end. Instead, he reached over and took my hand. "Rebecca, I've spent 4 years surrounded by people who have everything and feel nothing. You work 3 jobs and still find reasons to smile. You're taking care of your dying father, and somehow still have enough heart left to care about a broken stranger like me. If you think that makes you nobody, then you don't know your own worth." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of how much I'm starting to need you." The confession slipped out before I could stop it, and I immediately felt naked and vulnerable. "Good," he said softly, "because I need you too." That night, he kissed me for the first time. It was gentle and tentative, and absolutely perfect, and I knew without a doubt that I was falling in love with a man who could destroy me without even trying. The best part of those 2 months wasn't just Marcus, though. It was the miracle that happened with Dad's treatment. I came home from work one Tuesday to find him on the phone with the hospital, crying tears of joy. The doctor had called to tell him that his case had been selected for a special medical program. Apparently, some foundation had reviewed his file and decided to cover the entire cost of his surgery. "Can you believe it, sweetheart?" Dad's voice was stronger than I'd heard it in months. "All this time we've been worried about money, and now, it's like a miracle." I hugged him so tight I was afraid I might break him. But I was too happy to care. Finally, something good was happening to us. Finally, the universe was throwing us a bone instead of another obstacle. I called Marcus that night to share the good news, and he was almost as excited as I was. "That's incredible. Rebecca, your dad must be over the moon." "He is. We both are. I feel like I can finally breathe for the first time in months." "He's going to be fine," Marcus said with such certainty that I wanted to believe him completely. "And now you can stop working yourself to death." I laughed. "I wish, even with the surgery covered, we still have bills, rent, groceries. The 3 jobs stay for now. But at least the pressure's off, right? You can start thinking about what you want for yourself." What I wanted was him, but I wasn't brave enough to say that yet. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was during those 2 months. I was so caught up in falling in love and celebrating Dad's miracle that I missed all the warning signs. I didn't notice how Ashley had started asking pointed questions about where I was spending my evenings. I didn't catch her watching me more carefully, or how she'd gone suspiciously quiet whenever I mentioned having a good day. I was too happy to see the storm clouds gathering. Marcus and I talked about everything except the future. We lived in this beautiful present tense, driving through the city, sharing our stories, falling deeper into something that felt too good to be real. He told me about places he wanted to show me, things he wanted to teach me. I told him about my dreams of maybe going back to school someday, of helping people the way the Mystery Foundation had helped Dad. "You'd make an incredible nurse," he said one night. "Or a doctor. You have the heart for it." I barely finished high school. I laughed. "I'm not exactly medical school material. You're whatever you decide to be. Rebecca, don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise." Those words stayed with me. planted a seed of possibility that I didn't even realize was growing. But even in paradise, you can sense when something's not quite right. There were moments when I'd catch Marcus looking at me with an expression I couldn't read, something that looked almost like pain or longing or regret. When I'd ask him about it, he'd just smile and change the subject. And Ashley was becoming a problem I didn't know how to solve. She'd always been moody, but lately she was downright hostile. She'd make snide comments about my mysterious evenings out and ask why I was suddenly so happy all the time. "You're acting different," she said one morning over coffee. "Secretive." "I'm not secretive, I'm just, I don't know. Things are looking up for once. Because of Dad's surgery. That's part of it." She studied my face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "What's the other part, Rebecca?" I should have told her about Marcus then. Should have been honest about what was happening in my life, but something held me back. Maybe the fear that talking about it would make it disappear. Or maybe the selfish desire to keep something beautiful just for myself. "There's no other part," I lied. "Can't I just be happy that Dad's going to be okay?" Ashley didn't look convinced, but she dropped the subject. I wish now that I'd paid more attention to the calculating look in her eyes. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. But when you're living in the middle of your own love story, you tend to ignore the shadows creeping in around the edges. I was so focused on Marcus, on Dad's recovery, on this new version of myself that was emerging, that I completely missed what my own sister was doing behind my back. The first sign should have been Ashley's sudden interest in my schedule. "What time do you get off work tonight?" She'd ask casually over breakfast, like she was just making conversation. "Depends on how busy the diner gets," I'd answer, not thinking much of it. And after that, coming straight home. Probably, why? No reason, just wondering. It seemed innocent enough. Sisters ask each other questions, right? But Ashley had never been particularly interested in my daily routine before. She'd always been too wrapped up in her own world. Her job at the insurance company. Her constant complaints about how unfair life was. Her endless schemes to make more money or find a rich boyfriend who'd solve all her problems. But suddenly, she was paying attention. Really paying attention. I started noticing her laptop was always open when I got home, and she'd quickly close it whenever I walked into the room. When I asked what she was working on, she'd give vague answers about research for work or just browsing social media. Ashley had never been secretive about her internet habits before. She was usually more than happy to show me whatever celebrity drama she was following or complain about her coworkers' Facebook posts. Then there were the phone calls. I'd come home and find her in hushed conversations that would suddenly stop when I entered the room. "Who was that?" I'd ask. "Just someone from work," she'd say. But something in her tone felt off. The weird thing was, I could feel her watching me. You know that prickly sensation you get when someone's staring at you? I started getting that feeling more and more around Ashley. I'd catch her studying my face when she thought I wasn't looking, like she was trying to figure something out. "You seem different lately," she said one evening while we were doing dishes together. "Different how? I don't know. Happier, I guess. Less stressed. It's weird seeing you smile so much when Dad's still sick and we're still broke." I kept scrubbing the same plate over and over, trying to think of how to respond without lying. "Dad's surgery is covered now. That's taken a huge weight off my shoulders." "Yeah, about that." Ashley handed me another dish, but she was looking at me instead of what she was doing. "Don't you think it's strange? This mysterious foundation just swooping in to save the day. It's like something out of a movie. Sometimes good things just happen, Ashley." "Do they, though? In our family?" She laughed, but it didn't sound amused. "Come on, Rebecca. When have we ever caught a break like this? Doesn't it make you curious about who's really behind it?" The question made me uncomfortable, though I couldn't put my finger on why. "I'm just grateful. Does it matter who helped us?" It might. There was something in the way she said it that made my stomach twist. But I pushed the feeling away. Ashley had always been cynical, always looking for the catch in every piece of good news. I wasn't going to let her paranoia ruin the first genuinely happy period I'd had in years. What I didn't know was that Ashley had already started following me. She'd figured out that I wasn't coming straight home from work like I used to. She'd noticed that I was getting dropped off by the same black sedan multiple times a week. And being Ashley, she couldn't just mind her own business and let me have this one private thing. She had to investigate. I found out later that she'd actually followed me one night, staying far enough back that I wouldn't notice her. She watched Marcus pick me up outside the diner. She saw us drive to the lakefront and sit talking for hours. She took pictures of his license plate and spent the next day figuring out who owned that expensive car. When she discovered it was Marcus Hamilton, the billionaire CEO who was constantly in the business pages, I imagine her mind started racing with possibilities. Not possibilities for my happiness, mind you, but possibilities for what this could mean for her. Ashley had always been jealous of the attention I got from Dad. She'd always resented that I was the one he came to for help, the one he trusted to handle his medical appointments and insurance paperwork. She'd made plenty of comments over the years about how I was Dad's favorite, even though that wasn't true. Dad loved us both, but I was the one who stepped up when he got sick, and that had created a bond between us that Ashley envied. Now, suddenly, I had something else she wanted, a relationship with someone powerful and wealthy, someone who could change our entire family's circumstances with a snap of his fingers. But instead of being happy for me, instead of seeing this as something good happening to her sister who'd been struggling for so long, Ashley saw an opportunity. She saw a way to finally get what she'd always felt she deserved. She started researching Marcus obsessively. She dug up every article about him, every interview, every mention of his personal life. She learned about Victoria, about the accident, about how he'd become a recluse after his wife's death. She studied photos of Victoria from society pages and charity event coverage. And that's when she noticed something that would change everything. I had no idea that while I was falling deeper in love with Marcus, my sister was building a case against our relationship. I didn't know she was taking notes, collecting evidence, planning something that would destroy the first real happiness I'd found in years. All I knew was that something felt off at home. Ashley was acting weird, asking too many questions, watching me too closely. But I was so caught up in my secret world with Marcus that I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. "You're imagining things," I told myself when I'd catch her staring at me with that calculating expression. "She's probably just worried about Dad, or stressed about work, or going through her own stuff." I made excuses for her behavior because I didn't want to deal with whatever was really going on. I was selfish, I suppose. I wanted to protect my happiness, to keep my time with Marcus sacred and separate from all the messy complications of real life. But you can't keep secrets forever, especially not from someone who's determined to uncover them. And Ashley was nothing if not determined. The irony is that during this whole time, I was actually trying to find ways to tell her about Marcus. I'd rehearse conversations in my head, trying to figure out how to explain that I was seeing someone, that it was serious, that he made me happy. But every time I worked up the courage to bring it up, something would stop me. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, or the tension I could feel radiating from her, or just the instinct that telling her would somehow ruin everything. I wish now that I'd trusted that instinct completely. I wish I'd been more careful, more protective of what Marcus and I were building together. Because while I was learning to love and be loved, Ashley was learning everything she could about the man who'd captured my heart. And she was planning to use that information in ways I never could have imagined. The day my world fell apart started like any other. I remember that clearly because the normalcy of it made what happened later feel even more surreal. I woke up humming, while I got ready for work. Dad was having a good day, sitting up in bed and asking for his favorite breakfast. Ashley seemed almost cheerful, which should have been my first warning sign, but I was too happy to pay attention. Marcus had texted me that morning saying he had something important to tell me that evening. The message made butterflies dance in my stomach. After 3 months of secret meetings and stolen moments, I was starting to hope that maybe we were ready to take things to the next level. Maybe he was going to ask me to be his official girlfriend, or suggest we stop hiding our relationship from the world. God, I was so naive. I floated through my shifts that day, counting down the hours until I could see him. Even the rudest customers at the diner couldn't dampen my mood. I found myself daydreaming about what he might say, how he might say it, whether this was the moment everything would change for the better. When I got home that evening, Ashley was waiting for me at the kitchen table. She had this manila folder sitting in front of her, and there was something about the way she was sitting, perfectly straight, hands folded, that made my stomach drop. "We need to talk," she said, and her voice was different, colder, more controlled than I'd ever heard it. "Can it wait?" I'm supposed to meet Marcus Hamilton, she finished for me, and the world tilted sideways. I stood frozen in the doorway, my work bag still hanging from my shoulder, trying to process how she knew that name. What? Sit down, Rebecca. Ashley, I can explain. Sit down. There was something in her tone that made me obey, even though every instinct I had was screaming at me to run. I dropped my bag and sank into the chair across from her, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Ashley opened the folder and pulled out a stack of photographs. The first one she placed in front of me was a picture of Marcus and me sitting in his car outside the lakefront. The angle suggested it had been taken from a distance with a zoom lens. You've been following me. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. For 3 weeks, she said matter-of-factly. I had to know who you were sneaking around with. Imagine my surprise when I found out it was one of the richest men in Chicago. She placed another photo on the table. This one showed Marcus walking me to my building, his hand on the small of my back. In the picture, we looked intimate, comfortable with each other. It should have been a sweet memory, but seeing it like this, through Ashley's lens of suspicion and calculation, made it feel dirty. How long has this been going on? She asked. Ashley, please, just let me. How long, Rebecca? 3 months, I whispered. She nodded like this confirmed something she already knew. And during these 3 months, did anything unusual happen? Any mysterious windfalls? Any miraculous interventions? The way she asked it made my blood run cold. What are you talking about? Ashley reached into the folder again and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a copy of Dad's medical foundation approval letter, but there were handwritten notes in the margins that I didn't recognize. The Hamilton Foundation, she said, pointing to one of the notes. That's the mysterious foundation that's paying for Dad's surgery. Marcus Hamilton's foundation. Rebecca, your boyfriend has been paying your father's medical bills. The room started spinning. That can't be. It is. I spent 2 weeks digging into this, and it all leads back to him. The foundation is a front. He's been manipulating you from the beginning. I felt like I was drowning. You're wrong. You have to be wrong. But even as I said it, pieces were clicking into place. Marcus's certainty that Dad would be fine. His refusal to let me talk about money or worry about bills. The way he'd ask detailed questions about Dad's treatment, and always seemed to know more about the medical system than a businessman should. There's more, Ashley said, and somehow her voice got even colder. She pulled out another set of photographs, and these ones made me gasp out loud. They were pictures of a woman, a beautiful woman with long, dark hair and delicate features, a woman who looked disturbingly, unnervingly similar to me. This is Victoria Hamilton, Ashley said, Marcus's dead wife. I stared at the photos, my hands shaking. The resemblance was undeniable, not identical, but close enough to be shocking. Same hair color, same general build, similar facial structure. Looking at these pictures was like looking at a version of myself dressed in expensive clothes and attending fancy events. Do you see it now? Ashley's voice was almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. You're not special. Rebecca, you're a replacement. A poor girl's version of the woman he really loved. The words hit me like physical blows. Every sweet thing Marcus had ever said to me, every tender moment we'd shared, suddenly felt like a lie. Had he been seeing Victoria when he looked at me? Had our entire relationship been him trying to resurrect his dead wife? But wait, Ashley said, reaching into the folder one more time. It gets better. She pulled out what looked like official documents, birth certificates, adoption records, hospital paperwork. My vision was too blurry with tears to read them clearly, but Ashley was happy to explain. I hired a private investigator, she said. Victoria was adopted as a baby. Her birth records were sealed, but money talks, and I found someone willing to dig deeper. Rebecca, according to these documents, Victoria Hamilton wasn't just someone who looked like you. She was your twin sister. The world stopped. That's impossible, I whispered. Is it? Look at the dates. Look at the hospital where you were both born. Look at the mother's name. Sarah Chen. Ring any bells? It did ring bells. Sarah Chen was the name on my own adoption paperwork. The woman who'd given me up when I was 3 days old. The woman I'd never wanted to think about because it hurt too much to wonder why she'd kept one daughter and given the other away. We're twins, Ashley continued. Separated at birth, Victoria got adopted by a rich family and lived a life of luxury. You got adopted by Dad and grew up poor. And now, her widower husband is using you to replace her. It's sick, Rebecca. It's twisted and sick, and you need to see it for what it is. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning and my chest felt tight and nothing made sense anymore. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about Marcus, about myself, was crumbling around me. Why are you telling me this? I managed to ask. Ashley's expression softened slightly. Because you're my sister, and I love you, and I can't watch you get used like this. He's not in love with you, Rebecca. He's in love with a ghost, and you just happen to look like her. I stood up so fast the chair fell over. I have to go. I have to talk to him. Rebecca, wait. But I was already grabbing my jacket and running for the door. I needed to hear Marcus deny it. I needed him to tell me Ashley was wrong, that she'd made some terrible mistake, that our love was real and not some sick attempt to bring back his dead wife. As I ran through the streets toward our usual meeting spot, tears streaming down my face, I kept hoping this was all some horrible nightmare, that I'd wake up and Marcus would still be the man I'd fallen in love with, and I'd still be Rebecca the person. Not Rebecca the replacement, but deep down, in the part of my heart that had always known this was too good to be true, I already knew what I was going to find when I looked into his eyes. I already knew that everything I'd believed about love and hope and second chances was about to be destroyed. I found Marcus exactly where I expected to, parked at our usual spot by the lakefront, waiting for me with that gentle smile that had become my favorite thing in the world. For just a moment, seeing him there in the soft glow of the streetlights, I almost convinced myself that Ashley had made it all up, that this was all some twisted mistake, and everything would go back to normal once I explained what my sister had told me. But then he saw my face. Rebecca, what's wrong? He was out of the car and walking toward me before I could even speak, his expression shifting from happiness to concern in an instant. I stood there on the sidewalk, Ashley's photographs clutched in my shaking hands, and tried to find words for what I needed to say. How do you ask someone if your entire relationship has been a lie? How do you confront the person you love with evidence that they've been using you to replace someone else? Tell me about Victoria, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus stopped walking. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or recognition that this moment had been coming all along. What do you want to know about Victoria? Everything. But start with why you never told me I look just like her. The silence that followed lasted forever. Marcus stood there under the streetlight, his hands hanging at his sides, and I watched him age about 10 years in the span of 30 seconds. Rebecca, don't. I held up my hand, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Don't lie to me. Not now. I've seen the pictures, Marcus. I know what she looked like. I know about the foundation paying for Dad's surgery. I know everything. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, there was a resignation there that confirmed my worst fears. How did you find out? Does it matter? I pulled out one of the photos Ashley had shown me, the one of Victoria at some charity gala, smiling at the camera with my face and my eyes and my smile. Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to keep pretending I was special while you used me as some kind of grief therapy? It's not like that. Then what is it like? I was crying now, hot, angry tears that I wiped away with the back of my hand. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you found a poor girl who looked like your dead wife and decided to play house with her. Marcus took a step closer, and I took a step back. I couldn't let him touch me, couldn't let him comfort me, not until I knew the truth. When I first saw you in my car that night, he said slowly. Yes, the resemblance was striking. It was like seeing a ghost, like Victoria had somehow come back to me. I won't lie about that. Each word felt like a knife to my chest. So everything we shared, everything we felt, it was all about her. At first, maybe, I thought. He ran his hands through his hair, looking more broken than I'd ever seen him. God, this is going to sound sick. I thought maybe the universe was giving me a second chance, a way to fix what I'd broken, by using me, by loving you the way I should have loved her. I laughed, but it came out harsh and bitter. You don't love me, Marcus. You love the idea of getting a do-over with your wife. That's not true, isn't it? I held up another photo. This one of Marcus and Victoria at their wedding. They looked so happy, so perfect together. Look at her. Really look at her. Then tell me you see me when you look at that picture. Marcus took the photo from my hands, staring at it for a long moment. I see the woman I thought I wanted, he said quietly. I see someone who fit perfectly into the life I thought I was supposed to have. And when you look at me, he met my eyes, and what I saw there made my heart break all over again. When I look at you, I see the woman who taught me what love actually feels like. Don't. I shook my head, backing away from him. Don't you dare try to make this romantic. You lied to me, Marcus. You paid for my father's surgery without telling me. You let me fall in love with you while you were pretending I was someone else. I never pretended you were Victoria. Then why didn't you tell me about the resemblance? Why didn't you tell me about the foundation? Why keep all of these secrets if you weren't trying to manipulate me? Marcus was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Because I was afraid you'd leave. What? I was afraid that if you knew the truth about why I first approached you, you'd think I was some kind of monster. I was afraid you'd run away before I had a chance to show you that what I feel for you is real. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. So you thought lying was better. I thought time was better. I thought if we had enough time together, if you could see how much you mean to me, then maybe it wouldn't matter how it started. Well, you were wrong. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I was too hurt to care. It does matter. Marcus, it matters that every time you kissed me, you might have been thinking about her. It matters that you've been playing God with my family's finances. It matters that I have no idea who I actually am to you. You're everything, he said desperately. Rebecca, you're everything I never knew I wanted. I'm a replacement, I corrected him. A poor girl's version of the woman you really loved. No, he stepped closer, and this time I didn't back away. Victoria was what I thought I was supposed to want. Beautiful, polished, from the right family. Our whole relationship was about appearances, about building the right image. We looked perfect together, but we barely knew each other. And me, you're real. You're messy and complicated, and you work 3 jobs, and you sing off-key in the shower, and you cry during commercials about dogs. You're nothing like what I thought I wanted, and you're everything I actually need. Despite everything, his words made something flutter in my chest, but I couldn't let hope in, not when everything else had been built on lies. How do I know any of this is true? How do I know you're not just saying what you think I want to hear? Marcus looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him weighing his words carefully. I guess you don't. I guess I destroyed any chance of you trusting me when I decided to keep the truth from you. Yeah, I whispered. You did. We stood there in the cool Chicago night. 2 people who loved each other, but couldn't find a way to bridge the gap that secrets and lies had created between us. I wanted to forgive him. God. I wanted to throw myself into his arms and pretend none of this mattered as long as we could be together. But I couldn't shake the image of Victoria from my mind. I couldn't stop wondering if every tender moment between us had been tainted by the ghost of his dead wife. I need time, I said finally. I need to think about all of this. Marcus nodded, though I could see it was killing him to let me go. How much time? I don't know. Maybe forever. I turned and started walking away, leaving him standing there under the streetlight. I made it about half a block before I heard him call my name. Rebecca. I stopped but didn't turn around. For what it's worth, he shouted. I know the difference now, between obsession and love, between trying to resurrect the past and wanting to build a future. I know the difference, and I choose you. I wanted to believe him, but as I walked home through the empty streets, all I could think about was how I'd never know for sure if he was choosing me, or just choosing the closest thing he could find to the woman he'd lost. The walk home that night was the longest of my life. Every step felt like I was moving through quicksand, and my chest was so tight I could barely breathe. The rain had started again, because of course it had, and I didn't even bother trying to stay dry. What was the point? Everything was already ruined. I kept replaying Marcus's words in my head, trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't. I choose you, he'd said. But how could I believe that when our entire relationship had started because I reminded him of someone else? How could I trust anything he'd told me? By the time I reached our street, I was crying so hard I could barely see. I wasn't paying attention to where I was walking, wasn't looking at the traffic light or the cars coming down the road. I was too lost in my own pain to notice the headlights getting brighter, too devastated to hear the sound of brakes squealing against wet pavement. The impact came out of nowhere. 1 second I was crossing the street, and the next I was flying through the air like a rag doll. The world went silent for a moment. That weird, peaceful quiet that comes right before everything goes to hell. Then I hit the asphalt, and pain exploded through every part of my body. I remember lying there on the wet road, staring up at the rain falling into my eyes, thinking how strange it was that I couldn't feel my legs. I could hear people shouting, car doors slamming, someone screaming my name, but it all sounded far away, like it was happening to someone else. The last thing I remember before everything went black was a familiar voice cutting through the chaos. Marcus, he was there, somehow, holding my hand and telling me to stay awake, to keep fighting. I wanted to ask him how he'd found me so quickly, but the darkness was pulling me under, and I didn't have the strength to resist. What happened next is hard to explain. They tell me I was in a coma for 2 weeks, that the doctors weren't sure if I was going to make it, but I wasn't completely gone. I could hear things, voices, conversations, the steady beep of machines. I just couldn't respond, couldn't open my eyes or move, or let anyone know I was still there. The first voice I heard was Ashley's, and she was crying harder than I'd ever heard her cry in our entire lives. "I'm so sorry, Rebecca," she sobbed. "This is all my fault. I should have handled this differently. I should have just minded my own business and let you be happy. Please wake up. Please be okay." I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that I was the one who'd run into traffic like an idiot, but I couldn't make my voice work, couldn't make any part of my body cooperate. Then there was Dad's voice, shaky and broken, in a way that made my heart ache. "Come on, sweetheart. You're stronger than this. You've always been the fighter in this family. Don't give up on us now." But it was Marcus's voice that I heard most often. He was there constantly, talking to me for hours at a time. Sometimes he'd read to me from books or newspapers. Sometimes he'd tell me about his day, about meetings he'd had or places he'd been. But mostly, he talked about us. "I know you can hear me," he'd say, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I know you're fighting to come back, and I need you to know that everything I told you tonight was true. Yes, I noticed you because you looked like Victoria, but I fell in love with you because you're nothing like her." I wanted to believe him, even in my unconscious state. I wanted so desperately to believe that what we'd had was real. "Victoria was perfect on paper," he continued one night, his voice barely above a whisper. "Beautiful, educated, from the right family. Our relationship was all about image, about what looked good from the outside. We barely talked about anything real. We never shared our fears or our dreams or our stupid childhood stories. We were two people playing the parts we thought we were supposed to play." I could hear the pain in his voice, the regret. "But you, God, Rebecca, with you I could just be myself. You didn't care about my money or my reputation or whether I was successful enough. You cared about whether I was kind, whether I was honest, whether I made you laugh. You saw me, really saw me, in a way no one ever has." As the days passed, I started to understand something that I couldn't have seen when I was awake and angry. Marcus wasn't just sitting by my bedside out of guilt or obligation. He was there because he was terrified of losing me. I could hear it in the way his voice broke when he talked about our future together. I could feel it in the way he held my hand, like he was trying to anchor me to this world through sheer force of will. "I hired a private investigator," he told me one afternoon. "I needed to know the truth about what Ashley showed you, Rebecca. You're not Victoria's twin sister. Those documents were fake. Your sister fabricated the whole thing, even unconscious." I felt a wave of shock go through me. Ashley hired someone to create false adoption records, fake birth certificates. She was trying to make the situation seem even worse than it was, to make you think our connection was some kind of cosmic joke. But it wasn't, Rebecca. You're not related to Victoria at all. The resemblance is just a coincidence. Learning this should have made me feel better, but somehow it made everything more confusing. If Ashley had been lying about the twin thing, what else had she been lying about? And why would she go to such lengths to destroy my happiness? She's been arrested, Marcus continued. Blackmail, fraud, falsifying documents. She confessed to everything, Rebecca. She told the police that she'd been planning to extort money from me, threatening to go to the press with a story about how I was manipulating you. She was going to claim that our relationship was some sick attempt to replace my dead wife, and she was going to demand payment to keep quiet about it. I felt sick. My own sister had been planning to use my pain for her financial gain. But something changed when she saw you lying here, Marcus said. She broke down completely, started crying and confessing everything to anyone who would listen. She's genuinely sorry, Rebecca. She knows she almost lost you because of her greed and jealousy. As the days passed, I started to piece together what had really happened. Ashley had been jealous of my relationship with Marcus. Yes, but more than that, she'd seen an opportunity to get rich quick. She'd planned to blackmail him, to threaten our relationship for money. The whole thing about Victoria being my twin sister had been part of her scheme to make the situation seem more dramatic, more newsworthy. But hearing Marcus talk to me day after day, listening to the genuine anguish in his voice, I started to understand something else. Whatever our relationship had started as, it had become something real, something worth fighting for. I love you, he whispered one night when he thought no one else was around. Not because you look like anyone else, not because you remind me of anything from my past. I love you because you're brave and strong and kind. I love you because you work 3 jobs without complaining and you sing in the shower and you believe in miracles even when life gives you every reason not to. I love you, Rebecca. Just you, only you. And that's when I knew I had to find my way back to him. Waking up from a 2-week coma isn't like in the movies. There's no dramatic moment where you suddenly open your eyes and everything is clear. Instead, it's gradual, like slowly swimming up from the bottom of a deep, dark pool. First, you become aware of sounds, then light filtering through your eyelids, then the feeling of someone holding your hand. The hand was Marcus's. I knew that before I even opened my eyes fully. I'd felt his touch enough times to recognize it, even in my weakened state. When I finally managed to focus on his face, I saw a man who looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2 weeks. His hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of countless sleepless nights. Rebecca. His voice was so hopeful, so gentle, that it almost broke my heart all over again. I tried to speak, but my throat felt like sandpaper. A nurse appeared. When had she come in? And helped me sip some water through a straw. The cool liquid was the most beautiful thing I'd ever tasted. How long? I managed to croak. 2 weeks, Marcus said, and I could see him fighting back tears. You've been unconscious for 2 weeks. The doctors weren't sure. They said there might be brain damage, or that you might never wake up. I tried to process this information, but my mind felt foggy and slow. 2 weeks. Dad's surgery. Had it happened? Was he okay? Dad, I whispered. He's fine, Marcus assured me quickly. The surgery went perfectly. He's been here every day, but I sent him home a few hours ago to get some real sleep. He'll be so happy to know you're awake. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by confusion. If I'd been unconscious for 2 weeks, that meant I'd heard everything Marcus had told me during that time. The conversations about Ashley, about the fake documents, about his feelings for me, all of that had been real. Ashley, I said, and Marcus's expression grew complicated. She's here, actually. She's been here almost as much as I have. Do you want to see her? I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever conversation was about to happen. Marcus stepped outside, and a few minutes later, Ashley appeared in the doorway. She looked terrible. Worse than Marcus, if that was possible. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she'd lost weight. She looked like she'd been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Rebecca, she breathed, and then she was rushing to my bedside, careful not to disturb any of the tubes or wires attached to me. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Seeing my sister, my complicated, jealous, manipulative sister, break down like this stirred something in my chest. Despite everything she'd done, despite the lies and the schemes and the pain she'd caused, she was still my sister. She was still the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I know about the fake documents, I said quietly. Ashley's face crumpled. I confessed everything to the police. I told them about the blackmail plan, about hiring someone to create those fake adoption records. I told them how I was planning to extort money from Marcus by threatening to go to the press with a twisted version of your relationship. Why? It was the question that had been eating at me since I'd learned the truth. Why would you do that to me? Ashley sank into the chair beside my bed, her hands shaking. Because I was jealous, God, Rebecca. I was so jealous I could barely think straight. You've always been Dad's favorite, always been the good daughter, the responsible one. And then suddenly you had this fairy tale romance with a billionaire. And I snapped. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I thought if I could prove that Marcus was just using you, that your relationship was fake, then maybe you'd come back down to earth with the rest of us. But then I realized I could make money off it too. And that's when I really lost my mind. The twin sister thing. I thought if I could make it seem like you were literally a replacement for his dead wife, it would be more dramatic, more newsworthy. I figured if I was going to destroy your happiness anyway, I might as well make it worth something financially. Hearing her admit it so bluntly should have made me angrier, but I was too exhausted for rage. And when you saw me in the hospital, Ashley started crying again. When I saw you lying there, barely breathing, with machines keeping you alive, I realized what I'd done. I'd nearly killed my own sister because I was too selfish and bitter to let her be happy. I confessed everything because I couldn't live with myself if you died thinking Marcus didn't really love you. Do you really think he loves me? I asked. Or are you just saying that because you feel guilty? Ashley looked at me seriously. Rebecca, that man hasn't left your side for 2 weeks. He's been here day and night, talking to you, reading to you, begging you to wake up. He fired people who suggested he should go home and get rest. He's had meetings in your hospital room because he refused to leave. If that's not love, I don't know what is. As if summoned by our conversation, Marcus appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but the doctor wants to check on Rebecca. The next few hours were a blur of medical tests and examinations. Dr. Martinez was amazed by my recovery. Apparently, I was much better off than they'd expected. No brain damage, no permanent injuries. I'd have to do some physical therapy to regain my full strength. But overall, I was incredibly lucky when we were finally alone again. Marcus and I looked at each other with the weight of everything that had happened between us. I heard you, I said quietly, while I was unconscious. I heard everything you said to me. Marcus's cheeks colored slightly. I wasn't sure if you could hear me. I needed to talk to you. I needed you to know the truth. About Victoria. He nodded. I need you to understand that yes, I noticed you because of the resemblance. But Rebecca, falling in love with you had nothing to do with her. You're not a replacement or a substitute or a second chance at anything. You're the first chance I've ever had at real love. How do I know that's true? Marcus was quiet for a moment, and I could see him choosing his words carefully. Because Victoria and I never had conversations like the ones you and I have. We never stayed up all night talking about our fears and dreams. She never made me laugh until my sides hurt. And I never felt the need to take care of her the way I want to take care of you. With Victoria, I was performing the role of a successful husband. With you, I'm just me. I studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. All I saw was exhaustion and hope, and a love so deep it took my breath away. I'm scared, I admitted. Of what? Of trusting you again. Of believing this is real when so much of it started with lies. Marcus reached for my hand, and this time, I let him take it. I can't undo the way we started. I can't change the fact that I kept secrets from you, or that I paid for your father's surgery without telling you. But I can promise you that from now on, everything between us will be honest. No more secrets. No more lies. No more hidden agendas. And Ashley. Ashley is getting help. She's facing charges for the blackmail and fraud, but her lawyer thinks she'll get probation and community service since she confessed voluntarily. She needs therapy, Rebecca. This jealousy thing runs deeper than just being upset about our relationship. I nodded. What happens now? With us, I mean. Marcus squeezed my hand gently. That's up to you. I know I hurt you, and I know trust doesn't just magically reappear because we've both apologized. If you need time, if you need space, I'll give that to you. But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait as long as it takes for you to decide if you can forgive me. Looking at him, really looking at him. I could see the truth in his eyes. This wasn't Marcus the CEO, or Marcus the grieving widower. This was just Marcus, the man who'd sat by my bedside for 2 weeks, who'd held my hand through the worst crisis of my life, who'd chosen honesty even when it might cost him everything. "I forgive you," I said quietly. "But I need time to rebuild the trust. Can you handle that?" Relief flooded his features. "I can handle anything as long as you're willing to try." And in that moment, looking at this imperfect man who loved me imperfectly but completely, I knew we were going to be okay. The funny thing about rock bottom is that it gives you a solid foundation to build on. When I left the hospital 3 weeks after waking up from my coma, I felt like I was starting my life over from scratch, and maybe that was exactly what I needed. Marcus kept his promise about giving me space. He didn't disappear completely. He'd check in with me once a week, usually just a text asking how I was feeling or if I needed anything. But he didn't push, didn't try to rush me back into a relationship I wasn't ready for, and I loved him for that restraint, even though part of me missed him terribly. The first thing I had to deal with was Ashley. She'd been sentenced to 18 months of probation and 500 hours of community service for the blackmail and fraud charges. But more importantly, she'd started seeing a therapist twice a week to work through what the judge called deep-seated issues with jealousy and self-worth. I need to understand why I was willing to destroy my own sister's happiness, she told me one afternoon as we sat in our tiny kitchen, sharing coffee and attempting to rebuild our relationship. "The therapist says I've been competing with you our whole lives, but I never even realized I was doing it." It was strange, having these honest conversations with Ashley for the first time in our lives. She was being completely real with me, talking about her feelings without trying to manipulate or control the situation. "I think I resented that Dad got sick and you became his caregiver," she continued. "Like suddenly you had this special role, this important job, and I was just extra, the sister who wasn't needed. You were needed," I told her. "You just chose not to step up. I know that now, and I know that instead of stepping up, I found ways to tear you down. It's sick, Rebecca. I'm sick, and I'm sorry." Watching Ashley work on herself was both heartbreaking and inspiring. She threw herself into her community service, working at a women's shelter downtown, and for the first time in her life, she seemed to find purpose in helping other people instead of just helping herself. Meanwhile, Dad was making an incredible recovery. His surgery had been a complete success, and within 6 months, he was cancer-free and stronger than he'd been in years. Watching him get his life back was like watching a miracle unfold in slow motion. "You know what I want to do," he said to me one evening as we walked around the neighborhood together. Something he hadn't been able to do in over a year. "I want to help other families going through what we went through. Maybe volunteer at the hospital, or work with one of those organizations that helps people navigate the medical system." "That sounds perfect, Dad." He stopped walking and turned to look at me. "And what about you, sweetheart? What do you want to do with this second chance you've been given?" It was a good question. For so long, my entire identity had been wrapped up in being Dad's caregiver and the family breadwinner. Now that Dad was healthy and Ashley was getting her life together, I had to figure out who Rebecca was when she wasn't constantly in crisis mode. The answer came to me gradually. During my recovery, I'd spent a lot of time at the hospital, and I'd seen how many people were struggling with the same problems we'd faced. Families who couldn't afford treatment, patients who didn't understand their options, people who felt hopeless and alone in the face of medical disasters. "I want to open a clinic," I told Marcus during one of our weekly check-ins. We were sitting in his car outside my apartment building, the same place where our story had started, which felt somehow appropriate. A clinic, a community health clinic, somewhere people can go when they can't afford regular medical care, but also a place that helps them navigate the system, apply for aid programs, understand their insurance options, connect with resources they don't even know exist. Marcus's eyes lit up. "That's incredible, Rebecca. How can I help?" "You can't," I said firmly. "This is something I need to do on my own, with my own money, my own effort. If you and I are going to have any kind of future together, I need to know that I can build something meaningful without your financial help." He looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. "I understand, but if you ever change your mind..." "I won't," and I didn't. Over the next year and a half, I worked my ass off to make my dream a reality. I kept 2 of my 3 jobs and saved every penny I could. I applied for grants, researched funding opportunities, and learned everything I could about running a small healthcare business. I also went back to school. It had been Marcus who first suggested I had the intelligence and heart to be a healthcare provider. And even though we weren't together, his words stuck with me. I enrolled in a community college program to become a certified medical assistant, studying at night and on weekends while I worked and saved money. The hardest part wasn't the work or the studying or even the financial struggle. The hardest part was learning to be alone. For months after the accident, I felt Marcus's absence like a physical ache. I'd reach for my phone to text him about something funny that happened at work, or I'd see something that reminded me of him and feel this sharp pang of loss. But gradually, I started to appreciate the solitude. I learned to enjoy my own company, to make decisions based on what I wanted rather than what someone else needed from me. I rediscovered parts of myself that I'd forgotten existed during all those years of crisis and struggle. I started singing again, really singing, not just humming in the shower. I joined a community choir that met on Thursday nights, and for the first time in my adult life, I did something purely for the joy of it. I made friends outside of work, people who knew nothing about my dramatic past or my complicated relationship with a billionaire. I learned to cook something other than ramen and cereal. I bought a plant and managed to keep it alive. In short, I became a whole person, not half of a couple. Not someone's caregiver, not a victim of circumstances. Just Rebecca, standing on her own 2 feet, building a life she was proud of. The clinic opened 18 months after I left the hospital. It was tiny, just 3 rooms in a converted storefront in one of Chicago's lower-income neighborhoods. But it was mine. I'd funded it with my savings, a small business loan, and grants from 3 different healthcare foundations. On opening day, Ashley was there to help me hang the sign, Lakefront Community Health Center. Dad was there too, beaming with pride as I cut the ribbon in front of a small crowd of neighbors and local officials. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered as he hugged me. "Your mother would be too." It was the first time in years that he'd mentioned my adoptive mother without sadness in his voice. She died when I was 15, and I knew she would have loved seeing what I'd built. As the day went on and our first patient started coming in, I felt a satisfaction I'd never experienced before. This was my purpose, my calling, my way of turning all the pain and struggle of the past few years into something meaningful. But even in the middle of my triumph, I found myself looking toward the door, hoping to see a familiar face. Marcus had respected my request for space, but that didn't mean I'd stopped missing him. I'd built a good life for myself, a life I was proud of. But there was still a Marcus-shaped hole in it that I hadn't quite figured out how to fill. I was locking up the clinic that evening, tired but exhilarated from our successful first day, when I saw a black sedan parked across the street. My heart jumped, but I forced myself to stay calm. It could be anyone. It probably was anyone. But as I walked toward my car, the sedan's door opened and Marcus stepped out. He looked different, older maybe, but also somehow more at peace with himself. He was wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt instead of one of his expensive suits, and there was something in his posture that seemed more relaxed, more genuine. "Congratulations," he said, gesturing toward the clinic. "I heard about your opening day. How did it go?" "Good," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Really good. We saw 15 patients today, which is more than I expected." "That's wonderful," he paused, and I could see he was choosing his words carefully. "Rebecca, I have something to tell you. I'm leaving Chicago." My heart sank, even though I had no right to feel that way. "Where are you going?" "Haiti. There's an organization there that builds medical clinics in rural communities. They need someone with business experience to help coordinate funding and logistics. For how long? I don't know. Maybe a year, maybe longer. I need to do something that matters, something that helps people instead of just making money. You taught me that." I stared at him, trying to process this information. That's amazing, Marcus. You'll be great at it." "I hope so." He took a step closer. "I wanted to say goodbye before I left, and I wanted you to know that these 2 years of watching you rebuild your life, watching you become this incredible woman who helps people and follows her dreams, it's been the most inspiring thing I've ever witnessed." Tears stung my eyes. "Marcus, I love you," he said simply. "I love who you are now, who you've always been, who you're becoming. And when I come back, if I come back, I hope you'll give us another chance. Not because we need each other, but because we choose each other." Before I could respond, he handed me an envelope and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away into the Chicago night, my heart breaking and soaring at the same time. Inside the envelope was a deed to a piece of property downtown, and a note. "For when you're ready to expand, no strings attached, just one person who believes in your dream supporting another. M." Standing there on the sidewalk outside my clinic, holding that deed in my hands, I realized something important. I was ready to choose love again, but this time, it would be from a place of strength, not need. I just had to wait for him to come home. 2 years. That's how long Marcus was gone. And in that time, I became someone I barely recognized. In the best possible way, the Lakefront Community Health Center had grown from a tiny 3-room clinic to a full medical facility that served over 300 families in our neighborhood. I'd earned my medical assistant certification and was halfway through a nursing program that I attended on weekends and evenings. More importantly, I'd learned to be happy on my own, not just content or surviving, but genuinely happy. I had work that fulfilled me, friends who made me laugh, and a life that felt purposeful and complete for the first time since I was a teenager. I wasn't waiting for someone else to save me or complete me or give my life meaning, which is probably why I was ready when Marcus finally came home. It was a Tuesday evening in late October, and I was closing up the clinic after a particularly busy day. We'd seen 23 patients, including a little girl whose fever had broken thanks to some basic medication we'd been able to provide for free. Days like this reminded me why I'd chosen this path. I was locking the front door when I saw him. At first, I thought I was imagining things. It had been exactly 2 years and 3 months since I'd seen Marcus in person, and sometimes my mind still played tricks on me, making me think I spotted him in crowded places or heard his voice in coffee shops. But as I looked across the street at the man leaning against a modest blue Honda, I knew this was real. He looked different. His skin was tanned from working outdoors, and he'd lost the polished corporate look that had always made him seem slightly untouchable. His hair was longer, his clothes were simple, jeans and a worn denim jacket, and there were new lines around his eyes that spoke of real laughter and genuine satisfaction. But what struck me most was how at peace he looked. The haunted quality that had always shadowed his eyes was gone, replaced by something calm and sure. "Rebecca," he said, as I crossed the street toward him, and just hearing my name in his voice made my heart do that familiar flutter. "You're back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm back." He smiled, and it was different from the smiles I remembered. Less careful, more genuine. "You look incredible, happy." "I am happy," and I meant it. How was Haiti? Life-changing. We built 12 clinics in rural communities, trained over 100 local healthcare workers, and set up sustainable funding systems that should keep the programs running for decades. His eyes lit up as he talked about the work, and I could see that he'd found the same sense of purpose that I'd discovered in my own clinic. "That's amazing, Marcus. Really amazing." "What about you? I've been following your progress from afar. I hope that's not too creepy. Ashley sends me updates sometimes. She's very proud of what you've built here." I had to smile at that. Ashley and I had rebuilt our relationship slowly and carefully over the past 2 years. She'd finished her community service and had started working full-time at the women's shelter, where she'd discovered a talent for helping other women overcome their own destructive patterns. She was healthier now, happier, and had become one of my strongest supporters. "The clinic is doing well," I said. "We're actually looking into expanding to a second location, with the property I left you." I nodded. I finally accepted that your gift wasn't about control or manipulation. It was just someone who believed in my dream wanting to help it grow. And now, the question hung in the air between us. Loaded with 2 years' worth of growth and change and possibility, now I'm ready to make a choice, I said. "Not because I need you, but because I want you, if you want me too." Marcus's face broke into a smile that was so bright, so full of joy, that it took my breath away. "Rebecca, I've spent 2 years in some of the most beautiful places on earth, working on projects that literally save lives, surrounded by incredible people doing amazing work, and every single day, I thought about you. Not because I was lonely or broken or trying to recreate something from my past, but because you're the person I want to share good news with. You're the person I want to come home to. You're my future, not my attempt to fix my past. Even though I'm not the same person who left your car that night 2 years ago. Especially because you're not the same person. He stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with something new. Sunshine and sea air, and the confidence of a man who'd found his purpose. The Rebecca I fell in love with was incredible, but she was also afraid and dependent, and unsure of her own worth. The Rebecca standing in front of me now is strong and independent, and building something meaningful with her life. She's someone I admire, someone I respect, someone I want to build a partnership with. A partnership, equal partners, 2 whole people choosing to share their lives, not 2 broken people trying to fix each other. Standing there on the sidewalk outside my clinic, looking at this man who'd traveled halfway around the world to become the person I'd always hoped he could be, I felt something settle into place in my chest. This was right. We were right. Not because we needed each other, but because we complemented each other. I love you, I said, and the words felt different than they had before. Stronger, more certain. I love you too, he replied, and then he was kissing me. And it was like coming home and starting a new adventure all at the same time. When we broke apart, I was laughing and crying simultaneously. So what happens now? Now we figure it out together? I found a job here in Chicago, working with a nonprofit that builds healthcare infrastructure in underserved communities. It's not glamorous, and it doesn't pay nearly what I used to make, but it's meaningful work that I can be proud of. And us. We take it slow. We date like normal people, without secrets or hidden agendas or complicated baggage. We see if this thing between us can work when we're both healthy and whole and choosing it freely. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the broken billionaire I'd once tried to save, or the manipulative stranger I'd once feared he might be, but simply Marcus, a good man who'd made mistakes and learned from them, who'd done the hard work of becoming someone worth loving. I'd like that, I said, 6 months later. We were married in the courtyard behind the expanded Lakefront Community Health Center. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, but it was perfect. Dad walked me down the aisle, proud and healthy and beaming with joy. Ashley was my maid of honor, tears streaming down her face as she watched her sister marry the man she'd once tried to destroy. Marcus's family was there too, along with colleagues from both our clinics and friends. We'd made separately during our time apart. During the ceremony, Marcus made sure to include a moment of silence for Victoria, not as a shadow hanging over our new beginning, but as an acknowledgement that the love he'd shared with her had taught him how to love, even if it had taken him time to learn the difference between holding on to the past and building toward the future. When he kissed me at the altar, I didn't see any ghosts in his eyes. I saw only love, commitment, and excitement for whatever came next. Our story wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real, built on honesty, strengthened by forgiveness, and grounded in the knowledge that sometimes the biggest mistakes can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. And as we danced together at our reception, surrounded by people who'd watched us both grow and change and become the people we were meant to be, I knew that our love story was just getting started.